I think it's an interesting topic, you know, and I've had students here at VU who don't like group work, you know, and we get, you know, because of the diversity of potential groups, people who contribute generously, others who don't. There are all those little complexities about group work, and I think and this is where you need, if you're offering commitment to group work, whether it's small or larger groups, then it's important, again, I think, you know, in terms of a learning agreement. What do we expect of groups? You know, how do we recognise that, you know, it's important to include everybody in that little group, not the whole class, but in this group.
Hands up if you do use group work. Great. And hands up if you don't use group work. Okay, so we've pretty much got group work under control, I think. So let's just whiz through this. I'm just going to assume that. Yeah.
I've got a question though. What happens when you have a student that explicitly refuses to do group work for personal reasons? What do you do with that?
So one of the things about this session and the other sessions that we do, often the expertise is in the room. So what do you do when you've got someone who doesn't want to do group work? First of all, why does that happen? Why might a student not want to engage in group work?
Well, for personal reasons. We kind of tried, I suppose, to showcase the advantages of participating in group work, and regardless of our attempts, we couldn't get that person to want to collaborate with anyone whatsoever.
Yep.
And even when we said outrightly that this is part of the learning outcomes, so effectively you kind of said, we're the boss and you have to follow on that sort of instruction from us, that person still refused to participate.
The problem is not the person who refused to do it, but the other people who were left holding the baby and doing all the work.
Okay, yes, sorry.
I tend to, I've never had a student flat out refuse, but if they don't want to, I tend to try and explain to them that, you know, it's good to do it now because they're going to go into jobs where they have to work with other people and they're not always going to like the people they work with. So even if it's not a great experience, that actually is more valuable than getting a HD, because learning how to work with someone that's not the most collaborative person to work with, is more valuable, even though, you know, they want the good mark, and if someone's standing in their way from getting the good mark, having them just understand that it's the process and learning how to manage that situation, eventually they're going to realise that is more beneficial. Yeah,
we often talk about learning styles, and some people do prefer to work individually, you know, for whatever reasons, and others are more collaborative, you know, and like engaging and sharing that sort of. And I think you've got to get the right balance, because to say we're group work all the time is going to unfairly disadvantage maybe the odd student, but also it creates you know, a broader opportunity for the sharing ideas. And so if you have some students like that, I think you need to, you know, it's working from just a pair, working in pairs, to working in threes, to, you know, into small groups, and then just building on that. And you know, from a school perspective, and Sam and others, I'm sure would recognise, you know, talking about with young children about you know, your contribution and the respect. It gets back to all those things about, you know, we don't want everyone, you know, one person to dominate the group. That's not what it's about. Julie.
I just had a thought thinking about this. I've had students who say they don't like to work in groups previously, and it's Cara, isn't it? Yeah, I've tended to follow the line that Cara suggests there. Yeah, but I've also, I mean, if it's, and I think there's something about respecting different learning styles, and perhaps assessment tasks can be modified. And what I'm thinking of is I had a particular student once who was so incredibly shy that they couldn't work with others. And so I allowed that student in the end to just sort of sit alongside and view what was happening with other groups, but continue to work on their own, because that was all they could do. And we have to include all of our students. We have to make it possible. Yeah.
Let that student participate on those group activities on their own.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I've had to do too.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks for raising that question. Let's just embrace, we'll come back to you in a second. Have a look at this, because it may be that there are some really good expertise that we can draw on in this room. It's not maybe, there are some. But let's just tease this out a little bit more. So what are 3 positive factors for group work that you include that make it work successfully, and 3 things you know that can derail it? We're going to do an activity now called Give One, Get One. In your handouts, this is described and unpacked for you. So if you want to use Give One, Get One in the future, this is the activity that we're doing now. But on a post-it note, what are 3 positive factors that make group work for you, and 3 negative factors that have the potential to derail it? So just take a couple of minutes to write that down. So can you just stand up, push your chairs in? And the idea of Give One, Get One is that you're going to circulate around the room. You're going to find someone that you haven't spoken to yet today. Just check in that you know each other's names, introduce each other, and you're going to give one of your ask them if they want a positive or a negative, and you're going to give one of theirs and take one of theirs. Give one of yours and take one of theirs. So, and then we'll switch it around. Off you go. Now, go find someone new to talk to from a different table. Great, thank you very much. High five the person you're on, head back to your seat. That activity, Give One, Get One, opportunity to get up and out of your seat. So as much as anything, we did that activity because we'd been sitting for a long time. And students, like all of us, can get restless. It's good to have some movement happening in the classroom, and this is a nice one to give you an opportunity to get people up and moving around, and also to be able to speak to people that are not in their proximity because of where they've sat in the classroom, so mixing up the class again. Just write a note to yourself, either on group work or Give One, Get One, and as I said, there is a handout in your packet on Give One, Get One and steps you through how to use it. Note to self, what have you learned about group work? What do you want to think about with group work? What do you want to discuss with your group in making it work effectively? What questions do you have? Just a note to self on group work or that activity. Very quickly, write that. Last activity. Oh, sorry. You have one article. You have one article. Thanks, Steve. You have one article. There's a secret. No, I'm going to set you up in the future because you are just perfect for so many reasons. Okay, in so many ways. No, quite seriously. You have one article.
In a diverse way?
In an inclusive way. What we have here is a secret. Don't ask Steve what the secret is because he'll tell you. No, you've got an article. There's actually 2 articles floating around the room. You have one, the other half of the room has the other half. You don't know that because we're not telling you that, except we are because we want to model the whole activity so that you know what we're up to. I'm going to give you, it's a very short article, we're going to give you a couple of minutes to read through it, 5 or 10 minutes, but again here, be careful when you set a reading in class because not all students will read at the same speed. And if you've got students for whom English is not their first language, it may be that there are some difficulties for them in reading the text. There may be some key terms and words and vocabulary that they don't know that you need to front load and unpack. We will talk about all of those reading strategies, well, some of those reading strategies next week, how to unpack reading, how to get around the different reading abilities of students. That's going to be a focus for next week's professional learning activity. But for today, we will assume that you guys are all going to be competent, capable readers and can get this knocked off in about 5 minutes. So I'm going to give you just 5 minutes of silent time. As you are reading this article, I want you to bear in mind this question. Are all opinions valid in the classroom and to be encouraged? So I want you to read the article with that kind of question in the back of your mind. So quiet time for reading, go. If you need a minute to finish reading, or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, can you just show us how many fingers worth of time you think you need just to finish off so we get a sense? Okay, about 2 minutes then. So let's just come together. If you haven't quite finished your article, that's okay, because we're going to have a discussion about it and people can fill in the blanks for you. What we're doing is an activity called philosophical chairs. Hands up if you've done philosophical chairs before. Yeah, few? Okay, so what philosophical chairs is a debate style where you're arguing for one side of an issue or another. And there's all kinds of different ways to run philosophical chairs. You can, if you need to do this in a way to, you can do this at the beginning of a unit, at the end of a unit, during a unit to consolidate some concept or theory. It really depends on what purpose, and again, making that purpose explicit for the students of why you want to run philosophical chairs as a way of teasing out alternative sides to a debate. So again, select carefully the topic that you use. I probably wouldn't go with something really controversial like some of the nursing and midwifery people have to talk about, but it might be a really nice way to go if you're talking about a different topic that lends itself to exposing different sides of two sides of an opinion and more.
Social contracts. That's a good
Do it with a social contract, absolutely. So that's kind of the background of it, how to set it up and how to run it. I've given you a selection of handouts that are in that handout pack for you, so we don't need to go into those now. But basically you have two sides, and the sides will stand opposite each other. They will be prepped for the two different sides of the debate. Now you can do it in a little more safety by saying you're defending this article. It doesn't have to be what you personally think. You're just defending the views that are espoused in this article. Or you can take it to the step of getting people to declare which side they want to stand on of a topic, and they go to the side that they truly believe in. So all kinds of variations that we can do. And then you can flip that as well and get them to argue the side they don't actually believe in and see how they go at crystallising an argument against what they think they fundamentally believe. But we're going to go with, because we prepped, as I said, I kind of spoiler alert, you've got different articles. We'll start first of all by consolidating your understanding of what that article's about. Those of you who've got yes, you are entitled to your opinion are going to huddle in that back corner and just spend a couple of minutes talking through what do you think are the key points here? What struck you as you were reading that? What do you think's important about that? Those guys who've got no, you're not entitled to your opinion are going to consolidate up here in this corner and talk through. Yes?
Haven't we already lost? Because this article assumes that we would need to be entitled to participate in the debate, but we may not be. The article means that we're.
That's something you can unpack with your group when you get into your huddle, Paul, so thank you for raising that. Okay, so the pros come down here on this side. I want you in a long line just alongside. And the negative side are going to line up opposite. Rules of engagement. Those of you who've heard that pigs don't fly, they do. We have the flying pig. If you have the flying pig, you are entitled to speak. Okay? And there are all kinds of rules, again, agreements that we can have. There's some that we've given you. Again, sometimes when people are really keen to say their piece, they want to talk over the top of each other. You might have some dominant voices who want to...
Not in this group, though.
Not in this group, no. Who might want to hold the floor. You might also have people who are reluctant to speak, and over the period of time of 3 or 4 weeks, you want to make sure they get an opportunity to express their opinions out loud. Because one of the 21st century learning skills that we're trying to encourage is not only do they write what they think, but they can articulate what they think. They have to do that in the workplace. So we have to give them a safe space to practice, and particularly for our students for whom English is not their first language, it's hard to express your opinion in a second language. I know I lived in Japan for 3 years and it was just horrendous to try and say what I thought because didn't even know if I had the words right to say what I thought was trying to say. So we've got to give them every opportunity to practice. When you get the flying pig, you just put your hand up to get it, and that's why we have something soft that isn't going to hurt too much when people can't necessarily catch and throw, or they say something you don't quite agree with. The big thing about it is, though, that you need to paraphrase the thing that was said before, the point that was made before. When we teach this in schools, we always teach kids about you're agreeing and disagreeing with the point that's being made, not the person. So to try and not make it personal, it's like, I hear the point that you're making. Nick, thank you for making that point. So what I understand you're saying is blah, but I think this, or in addition to that, or have you thought about? So we find a way to build the argument in a way that's constructive. That's really what this is about. So we're going to take it in turns and hopefully see the argument build and grow. Who wants to start? Paul. Okay, I'm going to correct one. Okay, I'm going to give it to this side. There you go. Off you go.
I'm going to argue that students do have the right to have their opinion. It's all about what we're learning before, about respect and collaboration and having an inclusive environment. So if students are denied their ability to have an opinion, it will devalue their learning experience. The end.
I will follow the pig.
Do you think what I heard you say was that to ensure an inclusive environment, we should allow students to express their opinions? Is that more or less what you were saying? And in fact encourage them? I guess my question would be in terms of what do you do if it's an offensive opinion?
I think it's important to everyone can share their opinion, and even if they have, I have to rephrase what you've said. So sometimes when people are freely sharing their opinions, there can be issues when they have an offensive opinion that they can sometimes hijack the class or something like that. But I think a lot of the students can actually learn from those opinions as well, so it gives that opportunity to learn from them through facts. Yeah, that was my reason for why those opinions are important.
Oh, here, look. Yeah, good. I was just going to throw it at you.
So you're suggesting that, is that right? You're suggesting that people can learn from other people's opinions, but in order to learn something, we need a body of knowable things. And if everybody has a different opinion of what a knowable thing is, it's impossible to know it, so there can be no knowledge, so there's no point in listening to anyone anyway.
I didn't want to catch it. I see your point. That's a good point about if we let everyone have their opinions, then what's actually what's research? What's the point in doing any research and having academia if we're just all just having opinion? Yeah. However, I think that letting students have their opinion opens up doors for us to then provide them with, provide them with the actual facts. If that's what they think, provide them with knowledge of, another way of thinking that might be more accurate or catching.
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for.
You seem to be suggesting that by allowing people to offer their opinions, you'll essentially we'll enter a world where we can just let 1,000 flowers bloom. Now, the problem is that the critical thing is that opinion's fine, but opinion that is not based on kind of reason and evidence is not in the context for the opinion, and the expression of the opinion is crucial. So in any setting, we've got to make sure that it's perfectly clear what the arguments are, what assumptions we bring to those claims, else otherwise they can be meaningless and just not worth a cracker and potentially harmful. So rather than letting 1,000 flowers bloom, we can actually create a situation in which we'll hurt people, alienate people, and even worse, mislead people.
Just before we move on, one twist you can do in this is allow people to switch sides as they become convinced, either way too.
I think you raised some really good points, Steve, about the potential harmful effects of expressing your opinion. But I think what you also expressed is the ability to construct and facilitate students to develop their own learning. So you explained that opinions should be expressed based on evidence. Well, what if you use this as a learning tool where the students have to investigate their own opinions and find valid support and evidence for what they believe in? And then that will not only enhance their learning, but it will also broaden their minds and their critical thinking skills.
Yeah, that's right. On our side. Yeah. Thanks, Kate.
Come and stand next to me.
So, Kate, yes, I agree with what you're saying because I do think you're on our side now, which is wonderful.
Which is
And I think perhaps a useful way of thinking about it is the distinction between an opinion and an informed opinion. And we're arguing for informed opinions. You're just arguing for opinions. Is that right?
Oh.
That was to use internal conflict.
Well, you're saying informed opinions are the only opinions that matter. Informed opinions grow out of uninformed opinions. And because you don't like an opinion, that's absolutely no reason to prevent it being expressed. I think it was Voltaire that said, I don't agree with what you're saying, but I defend to the death your right to say it. So we must have a right to say things, even if they're not supported by evidence, because it's from that that informed opinions actually grow.
What do you say to that?
What do you say to that? Well, I can't quote Voltaire, sorry. Can't trump that. I suppose it goes back to the debate of what's evidence-based and what's not. Where does evidence start? Where does the idea for a new part of evidence come from? It comes from an idea. But I suppose, as Paul, I think, was saying, the context is important. Are you qualified to pass judgment on a particular topic or not?
And we're going to stop right there. So there's still a lot. Oh, good. That's perfect. So when I said we're going to stop right there, I heard, I didn't get a chance to, and I've got something to say. That is the moment to stop philosophical chairs while there's still energy in the room, because when we finish in a couple of minutes' time, people are still going to be walking out of the room going, I was going to say, and I still want to. You're still engaged in the learning. And that's the point that we want to happen in our classrooms. So at this point, if you were compellingly convinced by one side or the other, please switch sides.
Well, is it no opinion and opinion, or is it informed opinion and opinion? Because
I think we're getting a bit of convergence.
I thought it was really black and white, but then I made my statement. Everyone said I had to move, and I'm like, hang on, I said that it was.
And then some of the richness, this is great, some of the richness in this discussion comes with unpacking what happened and how did you feel during that conversation. So you can do a summary. There's all kinds of activities again that you can do, and they're in your handouts. You can write a summary of how the discussion went, as opposed to a reflection on how I felt when someone challenged my opinion. And that's a different thing. And then how do I respond when someone was disagreeing with what I thought was a great point, but actually they made a good point too, and now I'm totally confused about this. So just running philosophical chairs may not actually clarify anything other than to show the complexity of an argument that started off being quite black and white as far as the student was concerned. And that's really what we want to surface, the idea of listening to other thoughts and opinions, and let's not get into the whole content of that, but it's the activity itself. Can you see yourself using philosophical chairs in some way in your situation? Just turn to the person next to you and tell them what you would do with philosophical chairs, or if you wouldn't use it, why not? So just a quick discussion. How would you use philosophical chairs or not? Final thought thoughts on philosophical chairs? Useful, not useful? How could you use it? How could you adapt it?
Can I just put in 2 cents worth? One is, being careful about one person getting the pig constantly back and defending it on behalf of everybody else. 3-1, they sort of say...
3 before me.
Yeah, 3 before me, that's right. So if you've said something, then there needs to be 3 more others before you can get another go, so that it tries to control, the domineer. And the other one I think is important is about and we, when at Summer Institute, I've forgotten the topic. Can you remember, Max? John, what was the topic?
Yes.
There was a topic, and it was about education and teaching or something, and there were people who wanted to sit in the middle, It was, yeah. And some people felt, and eventually we agreed that, okay, some people can be in the middle, but there were people who were going across and swapping sides. And it was spirited. I think the debriefing is important. Just because the bell is about to go in 2 minutes, it's important that there is debriefing, because you don't want people leaving thinking, well, I was defending a position but I didn't really like it, and feeling a bit angry about it, or a bit miffed about it, or whatever. It's about developing an argument and being able to defend it based on in this context, on the facts. And so I don't think anyone said, can you show me, or can you identify in the article where that was said? Sometimes people just interpret what is written and they'll say it, and the others will say, assuming that it's correct. And so I think there's times to call people out in terms of, is it an opinion or is it what was written down in the article?
And actually challenge the text itself. Is the text something that you can defend?
Well, the No people had a fair discussion on that at the very beginning. Is the text fair? Yeah, reasonable. Yeah.
So, as I said, you may need to establish some rules of engagement, and again, it might come back to your social agreement if you want to use that as a way of going, keeping an open mind, particularly when you are dealing with something that's really controversial. And maybe philosophical chairs is not the thing to use if something's really, really controversial. You might actually want to use Socratic seminars, and I'm glad you asked. We'll do that next week. Just want you to take a moment to reflect on, back to our essential question. Can you just write a note to yourself back in response to the question you wrote 3 or 4 hours ago about how can I use Avid's high engagement strategies to improve student learning and teaching? What's your takeaway? What can you use from today that you can use in one of your classes when you start teaching? And so for those who want to brave this learning environment again next week, we are going to start looking at critical reading. So we gave you a 2-page article and said, read this. Terrible strategy, actually, and not very helpful at all, and we assumed you could all read. But there are some strategies that we can use to help students for whom reading is not something they love and they don't know how to do it, especially when you've got a really complex text. That you don't want to not offer a complex text, but you do want to scaffold how to get into a complex text, and we've got some strategies to work.
What critical means. It's not being critical of the article, but critical. How do I develop an understanding of what the arguments are in the reading? Yeah.
And then we're also looking at the I in WICOR, inquiry, deep learning as opposed to superficial learning so they can just pass a test, and Socratic seminars. And if you can bring a unit outline that you want to work on, we'll also allow some time for reflecting on that and being able to put those strategies in, which kind of raises the point someone else made of, this is great, but my unit's already written, so how do I incorporate this? And we'll tackle that problem as well. Other than that, thank you very much for indulging us and for your feedback.